The video title is going to be not clickbait. One of the names of the laws concerning keeping you from having a place to live is called the name of the title of video. But let's go on with this. Oregon. A building permit is not required to construct a 200 square foot, 15 foot by 15 foot structure. You just have to ensure that nobody can live in it. Period. Well, health laws and safety laws and fire laws and zoning laws and homeowners associations, otherwise known as creating artificial rarity. Hey, let's take down all the slums so that the prices never go, so we can raise prices. Let's increase property values, which means we have higher taxes, because the city wants to collect more tax money. Let's improve our standards and be upscale, like we're really going to be. Do you want to be posh, as they say? Minimum habitable ceiling height. For spaces and corridors, minimum habitable is 7 foot 6 inches. So if it's 8 foot tall, it's a good wall. Floor area. Here are your requirements. Depending on which city and state, I'm going to have various examples, but the idea is, what is the minimum size building that would be considered habitable, that you could live in, that you're allowed to build, that you can state you're living in, and have water, sewer, electric, insulation, waterproofing, 4 walls and a roof, the ability to lock it, a floor. Doesn't have to have a foundation. You can have pedestal foundations, which are just basically big cement blocks, or just put down cement squares. Just make sure you cut into the dirt so that it's already packed naturally, and then you set the cement squares down, and then you set them down offset by 1/2 square so that there isn't any breaks in them. You can even pour a layer of cement between them and put metal mesh in, and that legally qualifies as a foundation slab. You didn't have to pour it. It's a little bit easier to do. It's not as safe and functional, but it will legally do in many areas. But again, you're not allowed to live in it because yuppies. What's the minimum floor area? Let's start with the minimum here. This is the one you run into. First of all, you're supposed to make things too small to even be in if it's not considered a safe place to be in. Has to have a 7 foot 6 inch ceiling to it. So if you make a closet, you can make it smaller than that, but you have to make it physically impossible for a person to fit in it, so that a person cannot be trapped in a room. That's actually where that comes from. You can't make it to where if a person can be in there, they can't lay down full body length 6 feet diagonally, because that's called a tiger cage. If you're not aware of this, the physical dimension requirements for a building are based on prisons. You didn't know that? Let's continue. For your health and safety, you have to have a minimum size space to be in, because we said so. And we're doing it for your own good, even though we base it on prison standards. 70 square feet. The least dimension, the smallest dimension in your square, and it has to be square, can't be some other shape to try to get around it or make it hard to do, is 7 feet. So a 7 foot by 10 foot habitable room. This is a space you're allowed to occupy at all. And you notice it's more than 6 feet, so you can lay down. This was based on the original world's tallest person diagonal height and world's highest average height. The highest average height was a little over 6 feet, so make it 7. That way you are not required to lay down on a floor or lay down on a bed, which is just an elevated floor with cushioning, less than your body height. See also tents that are sold for diagonal dimensions for a human, 6 foot by 6 foot or 6 by 7. You may have noticed that. Okay. Oh, and I'm going to have a whole video on tents. 65 square feet. That's a 64 foot plus. It's a habitable room size dwelling of 8 foot by 8 foot, and if you make the ceiling height easy, it's an 8 foot by 8 foot by 8 foot cube. It's an 8 foot cube. That's all habitable rooms not the smallest habitable room, but all other rooms, period, minimum size is 8 foot by 8 foot by 8 foot. Look at the size of your restroom, your bathroom. One body height, one direction, and if you didn't know about the 10-foot dimension, it's based on you not being able to lay down and be able to touch one wall if you stretch your arms straight out and on tiptoe. Measure how tall that is. It's approximately high enough for you to touch the net on a basketball hoop. These are max dimensions for humans. That way you can lay out stretched out. 750 square feet for each dwelling unit in an apartment building, or 28 by 28 feet if you find the square root of 750 approximately. I'm using approximate square dimensions because squares are easier to throw together in a room and in a building, and to figure out your stress and cantilever points for buildings. So now you have to have, for an apartment, you have to have 28 feet by 28 feet, or some variation of it, or 7 feet by some ungodly distance, or 8 foot by some ungodly distance. Yeah, if you're in an apartment in some cities, they have to be 28 feet across. I've seen houses that were just a little bit bigger than that. Yeah, I grew up in the old days. 576 square feet for the first floor area of any two-story building at minimum, which is a 24 foot by 24 foot first floor. The second floor can just be the peaked roof thing, as long as you give it enough surface area with standing height versus sitting height versus laying down height for the following number. 1,000 square feet of dwelling in a house. So you take 1,000 square feet minus 576, you work out that's 425 feet, square root of that, carry the 2, divide by 0, and that gives you the minimum occupiable space, or 32 feet by 32 feet minus the 24 by 24. You can have a really small loft and a 24 foot by 24 foot, or variation thereof, little building for the first floor. But for an apartment, it has to be 28 feet by 28 feet because it's only one floor. But that's a room in an apartment with shared bathrooms and no kitchen or something like that. I've lived in apartments that were smaller than that, and in a city that made it legally illegal to do that. But it was a grandfathered-in building that was only modified in the 1920s. And then they rebuilt it recently, but they got a variance so they could keep the room size small, and it's still $1,000 a month for approximately a 20, actually it's less than 20 feet by almost 30 foot apartment with a separate kitchen from a room. So it's a 1-bedroom apartment because they put in a little wall, and you have to share bathrooms because it's grandfathered in, but it's $1,000 a month. I'm going to go ahead and tell you what I do this video with. This is a bicycle box. It's not considered habitable. Habitable means you could literally live in it. It's 7 feet long for the longest bicycle on the market, and it's just tall enough that it's the same height, 4 feet, that you have for the tent height you need for an adult. The size of a tent, whether it's for children or grown-ups, is based on kneeling height. Kneeling height for approximately 6 foot tall person, I'm 5'11", not 11'5", I'm 5'11", is around 4 feet. That way you can't bonk your head on the top of the tent and get it wet from rainfall. So they make this box that's long enough for you to lay down in, and just tall enough you can't hit your head on the roof of it, so you can get in here and squeeze in and get your bicycle out. And it's just wide enough, if you were curious about the width of it, to where you can lay down with your elbows out. No, I don't sleep in here. It's not habitable because it's made of metal. Just like a car, it's not really habitable unless you modify it. This is a tiger cage box. This is the same thing. But they made them obviously different sizes than that. But this is based on the tiger cage standard. And if you didn't know about the dimensions with your arms out, I can lay down a set of pallets in here, throw insulation in them, and put plywood up everywhere and thin insulation, that foam stuff, and this would be considered a habitable space. And legally speaking, instead of just undoing it, the draconian laws in the city of Portland, Oregon require that it be quote-unquote demolished. They want to punish the person who modifies it or allows it to be modified, including your garage, by requiring a demolition crew come in and destroy the building to punish you. This adversarial attitude towards a person improvising a space to live in and making it actually fire safe, insulated, and human habitable is to punish the owner by demanding they pay to have it destroyed. And that doesn't sound like the fix is into anybody. Wall thickness. Go grab a pallet and get a measuring stick. Here we go. 4.5 inch or 114 millimeter, 114 millimeter. It's based on a 3.5 inch wide 2x4 stud and drywall on each side. Adds another inch. You have plenty of room for it. And then the mid piece in the middle is based on another cut of a 2x4 lengthwise and then down the middle to make the block points and the jambs for the door. Door width and height are also based on something very similar. A pallet is usually referred to as the 3x4 pallet. There are longer ones, but this one's mine. Oh, there are longer ones that are 3x8 feet, 4x4, and 8 foot by 4 foot. 8. You can stack 2 pallets end to end and make a wall that's legal height limit. Floor area, obviously our 8x8 minimum habitable room is 8x8. So you have a 3x4 pallet. So do 3 of them across and 2 long. That's your floor. It's 9x8. It's larger than needed. You make your walls 8 foot tall and set it on top of it on the long end, and then you have to set them on the outside on the short end, or something of that nature. How do we make our walls work? You take your 2 pallets like this, 2 squares. For the next pallet over and the next pallet on each side, you make them like that. But the one in the middle, you put a pallet in the middle of it to bind the 2 pallets on each end to each other. So there's a pallet overlapping like that on each edge. And then you take one pallet, cut it up the middle, and drop it on top and shove it underneath and put them together with screws. Now you have a wall. You have to do this on a flat surface. Remember, cut a flat surface into the dirt, lay down your little 1 foot by 1 foot or whatever they are walkway squares, and put down a chunk of chain link fence or actual wire cloth, throw cement on it, smear it out nice and flat, and then do the same thing, but make sure they overlap 50% so you don't have any leak throughs. That legally qualifies as a base for a building. And if you make it with those squares, you can make it exactly the same size as the floor, slightly larger, slightly smaller. When you do the floor, you put in the insulation pieces. They're basically the same thing as walls, so you just keep making walls and tipping them up. What about the short dimension? Because it's 8 feet. Well, you can lay the pallets on edge and do the studs wrong, or you can do half split pallets by cutting down one of the middle pieces and get it very close. In the end, you end up with a building of 4 walls, no door. You don't put the door in yet. You have to move the wall out of the way or have that half pallet not included so that you can make the wall, and you put the half pallet in the middle of the shortest wall. Okay. And the roof. You stack up 2x4s that you've split off to raise one edge of the roof, let's say X number of inches, and you put your pallets across, bound, connected to each other, 50-50 points where they overlap, as your roof. What about the spaces between the boards? You take pallets apart, cut the slats off, you cut them to fit, and where the pallets meet, they meet like this, they're the gaps that are meeting, you put the slats in the middle and go them over to the 50-50 points. And then when they abut, you get them in there crammed and they're good, you nail or screw them to the boards so you have a complete surface. No, it's not completely airtight, but it's plenty for putting on your shingles and doing your walls up. Pallets are thrown away items. You can actually get completely functional and very, very well made ones that way too. A 3x2 pallet panel is 10 foot by 8 foot. Wall, floor, and ceiling based room. Arranged as the 3x3 grid of rooms, you get 24 by 30 feet or 720 floor square foot floor space. Or you can spend $56,000 on a 200 square foot, one bedroom, little tiny house in Colorado and not be able to live in it because it's illegal to do it. And they sell them at a premium. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck.